Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. And we will be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because we have as our guest State Rep Alan Skillicorn from Dundee. The show, what we're going to do here, there's a revolution going on. Alan Skillicorn, what's the revolution?
I like that revolution term. That's good stuff.
You say you want a revolution. It's the White Album from the people who remember the White Album from the Beatles. You say you want a revolution. Do you want a revolution?
Absolutely. Look at what the mess Illinois is in. You know, we went from the past 40 years from AAA bond rating to near junk. We have pensions that are out of control, over $200 billion in pension debt. We can't balance our books. Of course, we need a revolution.
So the thing is, Governor Rauner was elected in November of 2014, and presumably he was going to lead a revolution. And he had Mike Z who helped get him elected, and initially was Mike Z his chief of staff, and then Rich Goldberg became chief, or did Rich start out as chief of staff? I can't remember now. Do you remember?
Not exactly.
So,
but it was part of the campaign team.
Whatever. So Z was there, but Z shifted over fairly early on to sort of be this guy thinking campaign stuff, right?
Yeah, I want to say he wasn't chief of staff, but
he was something. He was a senior advisor.
Something about the executive director of the Illinois Republican Party, which was kind of...
The point is, Mike Z and Rich Goldberg were running the Rauner administration. Do we get that right at the beginning?
Yeah.
I mean, Rauner was presumably running it, but look, let's be candid. I can't like folks because I can be friendly, but I can't have friends because I'm a journalist. So you may like him. Do you like Governor Rauner?
I voted for him. I supported him. I think that he hasn't followed up with most of his promises, but is that his fault?
Yeah.
Is that Mike Madigan's fault?
Is it his fault?
50-50.
Well, what about some people say, the governor's a good sales guy, and he was good campaigning because that's sales, but even though he was like $1 billion in net worth and running a, what do we call that firm, a venture capital investment management firm, so even though he was doing that, he wasn't really the guy running it. He's not really a CEO type. That's the problem. Some even say he's a conflicted CEO for his first 2.5 years. Would you agree with that assessment?
I'm going to go back to what was his campaign slogan. It was Shake Up Springfield, right?
Shake Up Springfield.
Well, it's taken him 2.5 years and he finally did it. So that's really the thing, is that finally he's shaking up Springfield.
And how is he doing?
We'll see if we have some results.
How is he shaking up Springfield?
With this new staff. I mean, he actually has people that are ideologically on board with him. And he hasn't, basically, think of President Trump. He talks about draining the swamp.
So those people who were there, even though he brought them in, they were not ideologically with him. They kind of pretended, but you're talking about Rich Goldberg, the chief of staff. You're talking about Mike Z. I'm just going to call him Mike Z. I was looking around for Zoranek, some Polish. Mike, he'll forgive me. I'll just call him Mike Z. But look, he was a good tactical guy, good political guy. They knew how to say low spending, low taxes, smaller government, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think they deep down believed it. I don't know Mike Z. I know him. I could tell you a funny story from a decade ago. If Mike were here, I'd say Teresa Bartels. That would be a little in-joke between Mike and me. You know Teresa Bartels?
No, I don't.
Okay. But we all know that these folks are not thought to be, because Goldberg's an old Mark Kirk guy, right? 10 years with
all
Kirk.
of them were
Was Mike Z a Kirk guy?
I believe so. They're all political operatives.
So it means that if there is Mark Kirk guy, they're sort of moderate Republicans. They don't have a lot on principles. They just know how to get elected. And that's not a slap at Mark Kirk. That's what Mark Kirk was. He was a political chameleon. He knew how to be whatever he had to be to get elected to Congress, as he did in 2000, to get elected to the Senate in 2010. He kind of had a problem with the stroke, etc. But Rauner is a believer.
In some of it, he's a believer.
What is he a believer in?
He would definitely be on the side of free markets. I wouldn't say that he is an extreme right-wing conservative, but he's a believer in free market component of it. So he's not a social conservative, but economically he would be conservative. So the difference is those guys are political operatives. So that's
Oh,
different
they're
than governing.
so
Governing and politicking are two different things.
And all of these so like Goldberg, Brad Hahn, who's an old Hastert Topeka guy, Lance Trover, a Kirk guy, even the young woman, Catherine Kelly, who was there in communications, they're political operatives. They're not people who have a strong philosophy. Would that be correct?
That's correct. There's a difference between wonks and hacks.
And now you're not saying they're, well,
That's not a, not a negative
they
term.
are sort of
but
a pack. They're political hacks, is what you're saying.
Yeah, they are political operatives. They aren't about governing. And there is a difference there. And that's, I think, this big revolution now.
Rich, are you paying attention? My good friend Rich Miller from Capital Facts. He is the most inside guy. Everybody goes to him. He's got all sorts of tentacles spread out to get information. You have to read Capital Facts and Rich Miller to know what's going on. But you should know, Rich is not really a philosophy guy. I actually had Rich on, he may have forgotten this, more than a decade ago as a guest on Public Affairs. So I'm one of the few people who was watching that show. That's how it was our audience at that time. But like, what is your perception of Rich Miller's political philosophy?
He definitely has a philosophy, and he has an opinion. Now, I think he does try to be fair, and I think for the most part he's fair, but he does have an opinion, and that's also part of it.
What is his political philosophy in your view, in a nutshell?
Well, it would be a little bit more with the unions protecting the common man. I actually differ a little bit. I think they hold him back a little bit,
Yeah,
but
that's Rich Miller. So you're saying Rich kind of sides with what Mike Madigan has been saying. He's there, Madigan says, he's there to protect the middle class. He's there to, he doesn't mind taking money from unions because he thinks unions are there to protect the little guy. Rich and Speaker Madigan are kind of close on that, you'd say.
I'd actually disagree.
Rich and Speaker Madigan aren't close?
So I think that
what do you think?
Rich Miller and what I see in Capital Facts is he can be critical of Mike Madigan when when there is needed to be. I think that though the ideology that Madigan adopts, and I don't think Madigan is ideological at all. I think that he is the ultimate political animal.
No, but he purports to have. He was saying this during that 2-year fight. He says Rauner wants to change things in terms of taking things away from union people in the middle class. I'm not saying he necessarily believes it, but you heard...
He's opportunistic.
You heard Speaker Madigan say that, right?
He's opportunistic in that regard.
But Rich,
he is about retaining power and having more seats in the Democratic caucus than ideology.
Well, the governor said, I think he said that Madigan told him this early on, maybe even before he was elected, that Speaker Madigan said his job is to manage power and to make money from managing power, something to that effect. Have you heard that?
I have not heard it expressed that way, but it sounds to be
Would you say that's accurate?
Yes.
Because Madigan's got a law firm that makes a lot of money from representing big people on real estate assessment reductions, right?
That is correct.
So he's
and
making
look why
money.
We have not had any transformative reforms in property taxes. Why is that? Is because both the caucus leaders on the other side are making money off of it.
And interestingly enough, here's a place where Chris Kennedy and Rauner may have some common ground, because Chris Kennedy seems to be, that is the nephew of JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He is the son of RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, both of whom were assassinated. JFK, of course, in November of 1963, and RFK, I believe it was May of 1968, when he was running in the California primary, but the primary in general for president.
Correct.
Okay, that's Chris Kennedy, one of the major candidates for governor in the Democratic primary. But he's been very critical of Berrios, he's been very critical of Madigan. He says they have conflicts, so they can't deal with the issue you raise. They cannot honestly look at reform because they're making money off of the system that if it were reformed, they wouldn't be able to make as much money. So you and Chris Kennedy would be singing from the same choir book? Is that what they say?
Well, you can't, well, he has also taken advantage of the same perks also. But also, is he
who has taken advantage?
Chris Kennedy, he has taken advantage of some of those same.
Well, he went there.
Maybe not as
so
bad.
Even Rauner may have gone to Madigan to get a tax reduction. So there's a difference in going to a firm and getting a tax reduction and making your whole life about it. You would agree?
That part is correct. But
Chris Kennedy
is
has
it
not made his-
opportunistic also because he is not endorsed by the machine? He's not endorsed by the status quo Democrats. So of course, what does he have to do?
Whereas,
He has
so he
to
takes them
attack
on.
the party
But you're
chairman.
saying J.B. Pritzker seems to be getting those endorsements, getting the endorsements of the unions with the blessings of Speaker Madigan. So you're saying, looking at the Democratic primary, in your view, you're saying J.B. Pritzker has more to gain by supporting the Speaker, whereas Chris Kennedy, he doesn't have anything to lose by attacking him.
Pritzker has bought those endorsements a long time ago, and he is definitely allied with Speaker Madigan and his interests.
Okay, but we're digressing, my fault. So we talked about the old Trover and Lance Trover and Brad Hahn and Rich Goldberg, Mike Z, out with the old. They're gone. They're gone. Like way gone, okay? And in with the Illinois Policy Institute. Who would that be? Who is like the king of the Illinois Policy Institute?
John Tillman.
He's the CEO. I think that's.
I don't think he
popular.
has a job with the administration, though.
Well, but
At least I have not seen it.
yes, but he, as we all know, he would say one of several senior advisors. I would say it appears to be one of the primary senior advisors to Governor Rauner for the first 2.5 years. In fact, I was shocked that John wasn't having more influence in policy. But as some people said, Jeff, you have to remember the governor talks to a lot of people, not just John. But now he's not taken a position, but so many of his people from the Policy Institute have, starting with who's the main person in the Rauner?
Well, I think Christina Ramison
And
is there.
her position is what?
She's the chief of staff now.
She's the chief of staff, and who's also there from the Policy Institute?
Well, you have a whole new crew. The communications team
Diana Rickert,
is there. There's a policy advisor.
Mike Lucci,
Correct.
Laura Patrick from the Scott Walker regime, so kind of the same thing. Matt Besler now is there on the political side,
I
right?
think he might be replacing Mike Z on the political side.
Yeah, and he had been at the Illinois Opportunity Project, which was sort of the political arm of the Policy Institute. I may not be representing all the legalities here, so John,
Yeah, it may
tell me,
be.
don't get upset
It
with
might
me.
be more removed than you think, but
Yeah, but there's a legal connection there, whatever it is.
there's a small world
Okay.
among
Okay,
the thought process.
So Tillman is there in one form or another. Dan Proft, look, the conservative movement is now run by a triad, or has been. That would be Tillman at the Policy Institute, Proft at WIND, and Dick Uihlein, Uihlein, and some of the other rich people like Ken Griffin and so forth who are backers of Rauner. Do I kind of have that? Those are the people who've been running the state GOP now for the last 2 years. And of course, Rauner.
I don't know if I'd go so far because I haven't seen that affinity, from the inside. But
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely an influence there.
Okay, so that's what's running things, and now you say there's a revolution because of these folks. I'm holding in my hand here, folks, a list of the Policy Institute people. That's the revolution we started the show with. That's the revolution you're championing. Is that right?
For a long time. I mean, I have been about free market principles. I want to change things. I mean, I love Illinois. I want to stay in Illinois. I don't want to see us lose population. I don't want to see our debt increase. I don't want to see our credit get downgraded. These are real issues.
So are you talking turnaround agenda? Are you talking, okay, let's speed up. The turnaround agenda is kind of now passé. That was here, Rauner said that when he first became governor. Apparently, I would say Mike Z ignored it, Goldberg ignored it. They just went fighting to fight, like political operatives. I don't think they had an effing idea, if I can use that expression, on our former governor, Ronald Lodge. They had not an effing idea what those reforms were about. If you want, go to youtube.com/public affairs, watch Jim Durkin 2 years ago discuss those reforms on public affairs. The only time anybody from the administration was talking about it. But now Christina Rasmussen, she has like the idea of the Policy Institute's Budget Solutions 2018. So Rich, you should advise your people, if they want to understand what's going on, they should go to illinoispolicy.org, they should read Budget Solutions 2018, they should find, what is Budget Solutions 2018? Tell me, because At the beginning of the year, you and Jeannie Ives stood up with John Tillman when he announced his and the Policy Institute's proposal for a balanced budget. In a nutshell, what was that proposal?
Well, mostly it was just structural reforms. So, and I actually
No,
did
give it to
file.
me in one sentence. What does that do that was so different?
Well, it balanced the budget without hiking taxes.
Without hiking taxes, so it balanced the budget at roughly what level of spending?
31.5 million.
Yeah, which is our current revenue. So no change in taxes, they balanced the budget. Did you hear about that on Channel 2? Did you hear about it on 5? Did you hear about it on public TV with like Carol Marine and Phil Ponce and Eddie Arusa and all my friends like Amanda Vinicky? Did you hear about it? No. And why didn't you hear about it from them?
Well, they wanted to ignore it. And
Because they said, that, they told me this. This is not serious. Because I asked them, why don't you guys even talk about it? They said, this is not serious. And in their view, WTTW's view, so influential. It's not serious because why? In their view.
Well, they wanted the tax hike.
Right, because they didn't have a tax hike. Because that was the narrative. Everybody knew this. Paul Lisnick said, this guy he is like Mr. Left on CLTV. Oh, he's going to be in so much trouble if Sinclair takes that over. But anyway, for right now, Paul Lisnick, you watch Politics Tonight, you could just as well call it the left tonight because it's Bill Mueller. One guy is more left than the other, okay? Eric Rung. I mean, it's like left.
I still enjoy those guys, but
No, they're fun.
There were a few of us that actually
love
took
them.
that framework.
Yeah,
In the Senate, there was McConkey and McCarter that took that and created their own no tax hike budget. And I took some of their work, and I did the same thing. And there was a few things that I did differently.
You have a dozen people, real quick. You have you and Jeannie Ives, you have Dave McSweeney, Tom Morrison, roll call here, Mark Batnick. Tell me if I get any of these wrong. These are all believers in the balanced budget without a tax increase, sort of.
So I'm not going to put words in
Well,
anyone's mouth.
I will guess.
I would be careful where you stand, because I've had some of these conversations too.
These people are all not in favor of a balanced budget without raising taxes? Let me just read them. Tell me how many are.
Let's rephrase that. A balanced budget without hiking taxes.
Without, right.
Yes.
McSweeney, Morrison, Batnick, Saznowski, these are all legislators, folks. Barbara Wheeler from Crystal Lake, Dave Olson from Downers Grove, Sherry Jeziel from Antioch, sorry if I mispronounced your names, Tom Bennett from Pontiac, 2 senators, Kyle McCarter, Dan
McConkey.
Okay, so I mentioned 12 people. Do you suppose all those people generally support the Policy Institute Budget Solutions 2018? Balance the budget, don't raise taxes.
I'm still not going to speak for other people, but I can definitely say that Dan McConkey, Senator, also Senator Kyle McCarter, they filed their own no tax hike budget, similar to mine.
Okay, but the revolution wasn't occurring because I asked, and he knows. I asked John Cullerton after they passed their thing, after the Dems got what they wanted and overrode the veto, the rating agencies said, hey, look, folks, we're still a little concerned. They sort of backed off now. Because of this $250 billion in debt that the state has, and so maybe you're going to get rated junk anyway, because people buying bonds, they may wonder how they're going to get paid off when the state has $250 billion in debt.
The bondholders are still going to be safe, junk or not.
Seriously?
And
Seriously,
there's a couple of situations
There's no threat of default in Illinois?
Unfortunately, it's pretty solid, the promise to pay bondholders. There's no court that's going to take away that power. But there's more to it than that.
Even if the rest of the states,
they're not going to embrace all this because we're still in debt. We effectively shorted our pensions with this new budget. I mean, we did a smoothing thing. What happens next year when the actuaries say that we need to lower our rate of return again? It means we're shorting our pensions.
Explain that.
So right now, we're doing a 5-year cycle for smoothing our pension payments. So when the rating agencies, or actually the actuaries, say that we need to lower our rate of return. Right?
Your expected rate of return, as your
Correct.
expected rate of return goes down, what happens?
So that then our pension obligation goes up.
So that's why there's some difference of opinion when you might hear like Senator Tom Harmon when he was speaking to me. Tom, we'd like to have you on the show so you can speak for yourself. He say, Jeff, there's a budget, there's about $130 billion in underfunded pension liabilities. And you would say, not $130 billion, about 200.
There are different ways
because the rate of return. If he assumes a higher rate of return, he can say 130. If you assume a lower rate of return, it becomes more like 250. Is that
Correct.
roughly it?
Correct.
That's your
And
point.
actuaries on the public side have been lowering that rate of return expectation
That's
for years now,
the
and we're
rating-
behind the scale.
The
there.
rating agencies, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, they're the ones saying 250. Speaker Madigan, John Cullerton, what's Harmon, not Harmon,
We're talking about,
the guy from Oak Park, the senator from,
the Senator from Oak Park, is it Senator Harmon?
yeah, just sounds wrong. Okay, Senator Harmon, they're the ones saying more like 130 billion. The point is, now here's the point, folks. Here's the point. Because we don't have unlimited time. And this is why we have you here. So now, what is Rauner going to do now that you have this tax increase? Are there reforms that the state still needs to become stable? And how can he get any of them passed, given, what's the margin in the State House of Democrats to Republicans?
There's 67 Democrats in the state caucus, Democrat caucus, and there's 51 Republicans.
So
in the
they would
House.
have to win 8 to have a majority, and the next election is not for a while,
Mhm.
okay? And in the Senate, what's the margin for Democrats?
It's a supermajority of Democrats.
Yeah, so it's like
37,
37
I
to
believe,
22.
yeah.
So given that, are you crazy to think there's going to be a revolution? Are you crazy? I've never called my guest crazy
Well,
before, but
You have
Is my
rank and
guess
file Democrats
crazy?
that want reforms too.
oh,
So not everyone disagrees on some of these reforms. It's just Speaker Madigan. I voted on and co-sponsored a property tax reform that it passed the House, but it never moved in the Senate. There are plenty of these reforms that rank and file Democrats don't have a significant problem with, but Mike Madigan doesn't let them move.
yeah, well, okay, but even before we get to the Democrats, we have to mention these folks. These were called sellouts by Paul Caprio. Steve Anderson, Terry Bryan, Fortner, Hammond, Harris, roll call. Those are 5 Republicans right there. Sarah Wojcicki Jimenez, Bill Mitchell, Robert Pritchard, Reginald Phillips, Michael Pekin. Those were all folks who voted for the tax increase and then voted for the override. Are these 10 people politically dead? Folks, are you dead man walking? Or will they all be primaried? Will Proft and Besler and folks go after them? Because if you want a revolution, you got to make sure you're all on the same page. And trust me, these folks are not on the same page.
I think they're going to see challenges both from the governor's team, but also from constituents. Does that mean all of them are going to lose their seats? I wouldn't. I don't think that's plausible.
But if
there's
you go
going
after
to be
them,
pushback.
if you go after them and you win some, you shake them up. In the future, they're less apt to go off the reservation. It's funny. I mean, do you think the mainstream media, they say, "Oh, this is terrible what they're doing, these people," but they never say that about Democrats. When Mike says, "Now it's your turn to vote for the tax
Well,
increase."
don't forget what happened, to Ken Duncan here in the city when he, refused to go along with
He
Mike
was
Madigan
dumped.
and the
They
AFSCME.
dumped Ken
They
Duncan.
primaried
Mike
him.
Madigan because he dared to go with Rauner on a vote.
Correct.
And that's
So that does happen.
You need that party discipline, don't you? In that sense, Rauner is a bit like Madigan. Madigan's like Rauner. I don't think you could say it's wrong for Rauner, but it's right for Madigan, or vice versa. You need party discipline.
Well, you also you have some independence of the party too, but it depends on the political bed you make. You can stand up to your leaders, you can stand up to your party if you can back it up. If your constituents support you. So you're actually advocating for your constituents sometimes more than what the party said.
So, and what the party has to do is go after some of the Democratic targets and win those. Sure, Rauner won her Decatur district by 6 points. Manly, Rauner won her Joliet district by I don't know how much. Mayfield's a big Dem district. That might be a tough sell, but you got to go after him. Mike Halpin, Rock Island, Rauner barely won. These are all big taxers, Democrats. You gotta. My good friend Dan Proft. I guess I can have friends. I don't know. I know Dan. He's been a guest on the show. He may not want to be a friend. I'm just a little joking. Presidents like LBJ used to say, "My fellow Americans, my good friends." You got to go after these folks. You got to get them. You got to bring about change. And if you do that at the same time on the political side, What are those major reforms you're pushing for right now in your revolution? State Representative Alan
Well,
Skillicorn
it has
of
to be
Dundee.
pension reforms, but coming up, I'm sure we've got a couple minutes left, we're gonna talk about probably this education funding thing.
Real quick.
If I live
Just rip
here-
off the
if I-
reforms
if-
and then we'll come back to education.
Well,
But do it real quick.
Well,
What are the
you're
reforms?
gonna have to have TIF reforms, you have the property tax reforms, really, pension, property tax, TIF, those are big ones.
Pensions are big because about like half of the way the Illinois Policy Institute constitutionally and legally balances the budget without the tax increase is modifying pensions in a variety of ways that are constitutional. Getting those pensions to be paid locally, not statewide, that incentivizes people, since they're paying for the pensions, they're not going to hand them out so easily, number one, right?
That's a component, yeah.
You gotta, local government, you give the government 1.6 billion. Well, if it's not coming from the state, if now they have to take care of it, they're gonna run their governments more efficiently. So these
You also have to give
reforms-
them more freedom to control. I mean, so much local municipalities are controlled by Springfield and the unfunded mandates. If you give them some freedom, they can pass along savings to the people.
As Prof said a long time ago, you need system reform. The money, the drivers, Medicaid, big money from the state budget, 25%. Pensions, 25%. Education, 25%. Unless you're reforming those things, you can't really do much. That's where the money is. As the bank robber said, why do we rob banks? That's where the money is, right?
Well, so back home.
So let's go, we only got a minute or two. What's the big thing? It might be just, we're taping this on July 25th. It won't be seen till early April. They'll probably decide the Senate one.
August, probably, not April.
Excuse me. It probably won't be seen till August, and the Senate one education issue will be decided then. What is the nub of the Senate one education issue?
It's a evidence-based model for school funding. Unfortunately, it leaves Chicago out of that evidence model and funds it through block grants. And if I was a Chicago taxpayer, if I was a Chicago parent, I would be piping mad. Not because of this evidence-based model, but because Rahm Emanuel and the city council has billions of dollars in their TIF districts and they underevaluate property, so that's unfair. And in the suburbs, I mean, why should they pay more in property taxes essentially? Because Chicago doesn't handle their own books.
So your
right.
point is, Rauner should veto, as he's gonna do, veto this funding bill for state education. He's basically gonna try to carve out, take away the pension bailout, as he calls it, for the Chicago system. Maybe take away the block grant that's special for Chicago. Everybody else gets more money, and maybe they'll compromise on that. But the big issue, which the Tribune, my good friend Kristen McQuarrie had a nice editorial today, but she doesn't realize there's no reform of education. There's no school choice in that bill. There's nothing allowing people to flee the failing CPS and other traditional neighborhood schools, go to charters, go to vouchers. Do you agree?
I would agree. I don't think just
And
throwing more money, so my district gets more money, yet we have controlled our own property taxes via referendum. And so do we really need more money from the state? Probably not. We do a very good job at our current funding level, even though evidence-based says we need more.
So the main thing is,
it doesn't always make sense.
Veto that thing, do a mandatory veto, get something done, some help to some people, and then start talking about school choice, and then start talking about pension reform, and then start talking about Medicaid reform. Governor Rauner, lead the revolution. I'm not saying it, I'm just saying because I'm fair and balanced, but this is what your supporters are saying. That's what you're saying. You're telling Rauner to lead the revolution.
I have no problem leading it myself. I don't need the governor to tell me what to do. And so far, he's been a little ineffective in these reforms. So I have no problem taking the charge myself.
Well, you heard it here first. You just come back next week and every week, and you'll hear people like Representative Skillicorn, who's leading a revolution. And me, I'm a journalist. I'm just watching.